Welcome to video number 2. We are calling this one The Rise of the Colonies' Individual Identity. By 1732, the king had 13 colonies in the New World. But after time, they started to grow emotionally distant from England and started to really create their own identity. This identity really started with the growth of self and representative government, and would eventually separate the colonies in England so much that it would lead to the colonies declaring their independence and becoming the United States of America. So in this video, we are going to discuss why did the king allow the colonies to govern themselves? Because really, it eventually caused lots of problems, and wasn't the king all about control anyway? But before we get to that, we're going to start with talking about the colonies' different types of government. First up, we're going to talk about the very first successful colony, Jamestown, in 1607. And we're going to talk about their style of government. Now, in 1607, when the first English settlement came over, it was Jamestown, Virginia, as we just talked about. And they created something called the Virginia House of Burgesses. This was a group of men that were elected or voted on by the different villages in the colony to represent them or to speak for them. So as you can see in this picture, this guy, he's sitting in the middle of a group of guys. All of the guys in the room are representatives. So they're all from different parts of Virginia. They're all from different towns or different villages, and they were elected by the people in that town to speak for them. That's what a representative is, a person who speaks for you. And so as you can see here, this is a meeting, and they're discussing the problems that are in the colony that they need to deal with. So really, they're governing themselves. And this is known as the first representative government in the New World, in the colonies. And eventually, we're going to take this idea of representative government and we'll use it in the Constitution for our own government. So here's a more detailed explanation of how representative government works. Let's say you have the whole colony of Virginia. So this white space here is the whole colony of Virginia. And in this whole colony, in this big old colony, you have 4 separate towns or villages. Now, in representative government, each village votes. So every little person in each of these 4 villages, they're voting. And they're voting on who they want to represent them, or who do they want to speak for them in the big meetings. Because all the towns and little villages, they have opinions, and they want a voice in how the government's ran. Well, how they do this is they vote for somebody to speak for them. So each town, they pick their representative, they pick a person who they trust who will speak for them. These representatives are going to go to a meeting spot, or the capital of the colony. So each one goes, they travel there, they meet together in one room. The purpose of meeting together is they need to discuss the problems that are in their villages and the problems that are in the whole colony. The representatives who are there then make decisions, and then they take those decisions back to their villages. The point of representative government is to be organized and to make sure that everyone has a voice or a say or their opinion in the government. Because who you pick as your representative is your voice and is the person that's speaking for you. So voting becomes very, very important. This is how representative government works. The second type of government we're going to talk about is from the second colony, Plymouth, Massachusetts. Now remember, they came to Massachusetts, that point on the map, but they came for a little bit different reasons than Jamestown. They came to escape so that they could get religious freedom. Now, in 1620, when they were coming over, they sailed all the way to the New World. They knew that it was extremely important to be organized. They knew that the king was extremely far away, and if there were problems in the colony, or if somebody went against the group, they could not get help from the king because he was so far. So they signed a compact, or a contract. This was a set of agreements and rules so that the colony could be controlled and organized. This was called the Mayflower Compact, because they were on the boat, the Mayflower, when they signed it, as you can see in the picture. This was really the first time a colony said that they would be their own government, that they would be self-governing, because they really thought that the king was too far. So, Mayflower Compact was the first self-government in the colonies. Last type of colonial government to talk about is the first plan for a colony's government. In 1639, the first constitution was written. Now, a constitution is a plan for how the government is going to work. And the first constitution in the colonies was written by a man named Thomas Hooker. There's a statue of him there. And he was from Connecticut, and so he called the Constitution the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Now remember, the most important thing you can remember about this, a constitution is a plan for government. And this was really the first plan in the colonies and in the New World for how the government is going to work inside of the colony. Now you're probably thinking, who cares? It's not a big deal. But really, the founding fathers are going to take Thomas Hooker's Fundamental Orders of Connecticut and they're going to read through it and be inspired by it when they're writing our Constitution in 1787. Now, all three of these types of government styles eventually created a division between England and the colonies because the colonies realized they did not really need the king to keep them organized and unified. They could do it themselves. So, why did the king let the colonies create their own government? Why did he let them go off and create their own identity? What was he thinking? So, reasons the king allowed for the colonies to have self-government. What was he thinking? Well, number one, distance from colonies to England. Now, as we've talked about before, it took a boat about 2 months to get from England to the colonies. If you're thinking about it, that is a lot of time, that is a lot of people, and that is a lot of money to make sure that the colonies, you're dealing with every single little issue that the colonies had. So the king thought, you know what, as long as they're trading with me, as long as they are getting me rich, I don't really care what they do. That was reason number one. Second reason that the king allowed the colonies to have their own governments and kind of run their own show. And this might come as a shock to you and something I don't think we've really talked about that much, but or you may have kind of forgotten it. But you got to remember this. When people went from England to the New World to make a colony, they were coming from England. They were very much citizens and people of England. So think about this. Let's think about nowadays. If we took all of the 8th grade and we created a colony somewhere else, okay? We moved away, we created a colony, we would still take with us really how Americans act, how Americans talk, how Americans run their lives, how the American government runs. Okay, we'd still take a lot of those things with us because we are American citizens. We're people of America. So when we leave, all those things that we think about the world don't change. They come with us. So this was the second reason that the king kind of just let them do their own thing. Because colonists were Englishmen. He's like, they know the rules. They talked as the British. They mostly believed the same thing as England. They wanted England to grow and be a strong country. They had pride in being from England because colonists were Englishmen. They were citizens of England. So the king did not really worry too much at first because he knew that they knew the rules. He was the king and they knew what to do. All right, last reason that the king kind of let the colonies run their own show. And it's something called solitary neglect. Now, I know this sounds weird, but think of solitary confinement. You know, when you get in trouble and you're kind of put all the way by yourself, or someone in prison who they start a fight, they're put in solitary confinement and then just like a jail cell by themselves and nobody can talk to them or speak to them or anything. That is what we're talking about. So when you're put in an area kind of like all by yourself. Well, the colonies were really kind of like that. They were far away from England, like we talked about earlier. And so, really, the king couldn't be bothered by problems inside the colonies. He didn't really care. As long as they were making him rich, that's all he cared about. So he neglected them. He did not really care about them. And just so you know, the word neglect, it's really when you do not really care about something, so you ignore it. So the king, he just kind of ignored the colonies. And so the colonies, they had to start taking care of themselves. This would eventually cause the king lots of problems because, as we well know, the colonies start taking care of themselves. They don't really think they need England. England starts being pushy and problems arise. We declare independence, blah, blah, blah. We'll get there, I promise. So these are the 3 top reasons that the king let the colonies run their own show. So, in review, the different types of colonial government. We have the Virginia House of Burgesses, which was a representative government. We have Mayflower Compact, which was the first self-government because it was a contract of rules and agreements. And we have the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, which was the very first constitution in the colonies. We also have our 3 reasons that the king allowed for this self-government to happen. Number 1, distance from the colonies to England, too far away for him to care. Number 2, he thought, the colonists are Englishmen, they know what to do, they know I'm in charge. And number 3, solitary neglect. He didn't feel like he should care because as long as they were making him rich, that's all that mattered. Alrighty, that's the end of video number 2. Go ahead and go quiz out. Good luck.